92% of couples report increased conflict on the other side of the birth of their first baby, and the other 8% are liars. They're all lying.
Hello and welcome to the Be Well Baby podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Spaeth. You are in for such a treat. This conversation is actually what inspired me to take the podcast public because I realized every human should know this stuff. In this episode, Barb Buckner-Suarez, childbirth educator and parent coach, breaks down neurobiology, love languages, and conflict resolution in a way that's practical, validating, and yes, surprisingly straightforward. You are going to walk away with ideas you can implement right now for resolving conflicts with your partner, a framework for understanding how you both feel loved, and a deeply validating conversation on breaking generational trauma. One that reminded me why healing and connection are possible for every single parent. I promise you will walk away feeling seen, a little lighter, and ready to connect on a whole new level. Let's welcome Barb.
So welcome, Barb.
Hi, I'm super happy to be here.
I'm going to dive in with my very first question for you. And I know that you were talking about this earlier today, even at a presentation, but you talk a lot about maternal brain changes. So what are some of the most fascinating or even misunderstood shifts that can happen neurologically during pregnancy and postpartum?
So I'm not going to go into my full presentation, right? But there are like 8, 9 different areas of the brain that shift and change pretty much starting from the moment you say, I think I want to be a mom. And that is kind of is shocking to folks. But the idea of mommy brain is really denigrated in our culture. People think it means that we actually have lost our capabilities. And in fact, I would love to actually just encourage folks to understand you're just pruning away crap that doesn't matter so that you can actually do the incredibly important work of learning how to parent your child. And so some of the things that I think are interesting is the brain changes that happen for the person who's pregnant really start from like, I want to be a parent. The brain changes for a partner aren't going to be happening unless they take part in the day-to-day caregiving of their child. And there's like 8 or 9 different structures that change for the person who's given birth, and there's one that changes significantly for the partner.
So Barb, you're saying that as soon as a person decides that they might want to be a mom, maternal mom, and birth a human, that is when brain changes begin. But for a partner, the brain changes don't begin until they meet that baby.
Until they meet the baby. And I mean, just as a side note, if you talk to most non-pregnant partners, especially if they happen to be male, the baby is theoretical until the baby is coming out of their person's body. And they will suddenly be like, oh my God, there was a baby inside you this whole time. And they won't say it into the space because it makes them look like an idiot. But the reality is it has not been real for them until that moment. And I think it's a really important thing to say because those of us who've been pregnant, we have a monthly, weekly, daily, hourly, minute by minute, second by second reminder that our lives are changing and we are inching towards parenthood and our partners literally get slammed into it. And so we, on the other side of giving birth, are like, step up and parent. And they're like, I just became a dad. And you're like, oh, did you just become a dad? Like, you know, there's that like tendency to be like, I don't think so, pal. Like you were there at the beginning. I think the idea of encouraging those of us who've given birth to recognize that is super, super important. And then really as soon as is humanly possible, after that first feeding, maybe you're getting cleaned up or taking a shower, that's the time where your partner should get some skin-to-skin contact with that baby. And then they should really be given the tasks of diapering the baby, bathing the baby, bringing the baby to and from you in between feedings, all of those day-to-day stuff, because that creates a positive parenting feedback loop for the secondary parent. And I hate to say primary and secondary, but the primary parent is the one where the baby came out of your body. And that's just
we're talking about biology. We're not talking about identity.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's the biological thing that happened. The baby came out of one particular body, and that's the body where the brain changes happen as soon as you even, and that's remarkable that like as soon as you even think, maybe I want to birth a human, your brain starts to change.
Well, and it sometimes can actually then correlate to how people who are really ambivalent their whole life, all of a sudden they're like, yeah, I think I want to be a mom. And then they're like, and I will go to the ends of the earth to make this happen. Like the drive kind of almost becomes a little bit like people at the outside are like, I didn't even think that they wanted to be a mom. And then, oh my gosh, look at all the work that they're doing to try and make it happen.
Yeah.
There is kind of it's called a brain hormone behavior constellation, and it turns on. And when it turns on, it stays in the on position.
Brain hormone behavior. So your brain has a little change, the hormones start to change, which changes your behavior. Is that like a cycle?
Exactly.
So then the behavior changes the brain, changes the hormone.
And it's really beautiful because it all kind of like really works out in such a way that the feedback loop that happens encourages positive maternal behaviors. It encourages you to be connected and bonded with your baby, all that kind of good stuff, which is why I really emphasize like getting the partners in there as soon as possible after, because we want that same kind of positive parenting feedback loop to start right from the very beginning. It changes so that the partner's not like, oh yeah, this is my baby. They're like, this baby is mine. And that's kind of what we want. We want that significant bonding to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And so those small caregiving tasks are what boosts oxytocin in the partner. They are what change the brain.
Yep.
So what would you say to someone who's really struggling to, especially the people who thought that they didn't want kids, and then all of a sudden this brain hormone behavior constellation started happening? What do you say to those people who are struggling to kind of recognize themselves in a new version of their brain and their body and their self-identity?
So I think something that's really important to know is that it can be a little, what do I want to say, disconcerting or maybe confusing or kind of like make you feel like, oh, what is happening to me? And I think if we can go back to the idea of like those changes are there for a very important reason, and that is to actually grow your empathy and your ability to kind of connect with this little person. Neurobiologically, there's an important dyad exchange between the two of you. All of that's really important, and it's very heightened for the first 12 weeks postpartum. And then it kind of like settles in. So it was something that I think is super important for new mamas to know in particular, and new parents, postpartum parents to know, is that intensity where you're like, I always tell people, don't make any sudden moves in the first 12 weeks. Like, don't quit your job. Don't think that this is who I'm going to be for the rest of my life, because it can be a little terrifying. If you're somebody that you have a career that you love, this baby in those first 12 weeks kind of becomes paramount to everyone and everything else. And it's a little freaky and it freaks people out. So to remind folks, it's supposed to happen in those first 12 weeks so that baby will survive a really critical period of development, which is a newborn period. And then it calms down a little bit. But then I want people to also know this, it's going to flare, and it will flare anytime. And I mean, I've been at it for 25 years. It's going to flare anytime the physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual health and well-being of your child is threatened. Your kiddo gets a high fever, boom, it's on, and you're like, what do we need to do? And then the fever goes away and you're chill again. You have to figure out, your kid's in preschool and there's a biter. You're like, oh, I'm going to take little Johnny out because he's biting my kid. And then it settles down again. Or they go off to college because I'm in this like totally different zone. It will flare, and sometimes allows you to have a weird connection. I know when to call my kids who are not living in my house. I have a sixth sense about what's happening to them. And I also have a healthy respect for the fact that it's going to be there and it's going to settle down so that I can actually kind of like ride the waves of what it is to be a mama. I will say this too. It is a huge blessing. And if you think about it from a biological standpoint, like we were one organism, me and my child, right? And then we became two. So it makes sense that there's a lot of connection and beautiful stuff in there. And it's also a burden. I run into and talk to parents sometimes, and they're like, I want my partner's brain to change this way. And I have to say that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, not in the same way. We want them to be thinking 6 weeks from now, my kid is going to need a new pair of mittens because they outgrew last year's mittens. And I'm going to tell you right now, your partner is never going to think 6 weeks ahead from now, we actually have to go get them a pair of mittens. That doesn't mean that they can't take on the task of getting the mittens. And sometimes moms will come back to me and say, well, what if they get the wrong kind? I'm like, then I guess they get to go back to the store. What if they get ones that my kiddo doesn't like? they should take the kid with them so that they can pick it out. Like there are tasks that we can absolutely offload. And I encourage moms to do so because it's too much. But the mental load that we're talking about, trying to get your partner's brain to change in the way that yours has, is not going to happen.
Well,
so there's a different conversation.
Totally. Isn't there also like the fetal cells are still inside?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's called microchimerism. And it actually, I don't know if folks know this, but yeah, the fetal cells remain in our body. And because they're fetal cells, they can change. So if you were to have, they've done a study where if you were to have a heart condition, those fetal cells can change into cardiac cells and migrate to the mother's heart and help fix the damage. That's crazy.
That's magical.
I know, it's magical. It's totally magical.
I think I remembered us talking about this before, but that the subsequent siblings also have those cells from the first babies in them. Like each baby. I think that's something that I went in on a deep dive when you first taught me about this because it was so fascinating, but that each subsequent kid has the fetal cells from the first one that grew and the other ones that grew.
Well, and it's also crazy to think about how we as eggs were in our mom when she was in grandma, right? Like that whole, it's kind of wild, actually.
It's wild. Okay. So I think we kind of started touching on it, but why do you think, conflict does escalate? And I think there's on day 3 postpartum, there's always this moment where you're like, you don't understand what I'm going through. Why are you treating me like I didn't just do something insane? So why do you think that if things escalate and things feel trickier in the postpartum period?
Well, there's a couple of culprits, right? I love the fact that you mentioned day 3, because I call day 3 to day 5 your leaky days, where you're going to be leaking from your eyes and from your boobs and from down below, because every orifice is going to have some kind of bodily fluid coming out of it. But there's a lot to be said about the hormones of pregnancy crashing, okay, so that the hormone of prolactin can come on board, so it can start making that full milk, which is going to come in between day 3 and day 5. So that that huge hormonal shift is a lot of what's going on. And it's really challenging for the postpartum parent to remember that that's happening and to also be in any way, shape, or form logical about it. It's just it's happening and this is my emotion. Then when we layer on top of it, the neurobiological changes that are screaming at you as the person who's given birth, you are the most important and actually probably the only person who can do this job, which is a lie. It's a lie, but our brain will tell us that. It also says that we're the best at it. So we become kind of gatekeeper-ish, right? I know what to do. And it kind of gets reinforced because the baby literally, from birth, if they could climb back inside of you, it's exactly what they would do. They come out and they're like, this is nuts. Get me back in. And so every time they land on your chest, they settle. So to a postpartum parent, it looks like, wow, they are obviously know what they're doing. That mother's instinct is full, which is all crap as well. And so this weird dynamic of it looks like she already knows what to do and she's really good at it and I stand outside of it. That's in play there. Sleep deprivation, I don't know. I try real hard when I'm working with my families to really, really, really hit the level of sleep deprivation in those first couple of weeks in particular, because it is at torture levels for real. And I think we have a tendency to be like, oh, you're going to be really tired. And I'm like, you're not going to know day from night, honestly. It's that level of what just happened to me. And I feel like it's ripe for conflict to kind of rear. You're also learning hundreds of new parenting skills, hundreds in a very compressed amount of time. And people want a manual or an outline of how we're supposed to do this. And you can take all the classes, and I would never deny people to take how to bathe a baby and diaper a baby. I think those are great classes. And none of it really truly prepares you for this child, because your manual is your child. They come into the world and they're like, I'm going to teach you how to actually care for me. And it's a lot. So conflict, totally. It would be weird if you didn't have increased conflict on the other side. And I think the statistic that I throw out that sometimes people are like, but I say it, 92% of couples report increased conflict on the other side of the birth of their first baby. And the other 8% are liars. They're all lying. 100% of couples have increased conflict, because I want that to be normalized. And I don't want people to be looking at each other on the other side of this day 3 and thinking, why the hell did we decide to do this? This was a terrible idea. We're fighting now. We never fought before.
Right.
You probably did fight before, but it feels really, really heightened and intense. And I think it's important to note that that's normal.
Yeah. Is there something that couples need to like unlearn about conflict that can help them kind of move through the postpartum period with more connection?
Yes, I would say yes. First and foremost, like understanding where it's coming from and why. I think that that's a big piece.
I feel like that you say that like, oh yeah, this is the thing. But no, like that can be all of it. Like that's so important. It's so big. Like I, have had the privilege of having these like personal discoveries with you where I say something that I've said 100 times, but then you repeat it back to me and I'm like, oh, that is the thing. That is the root of it all. And so like not being able to identify the actual root of a conflict is probably the biggest reason for conflict in those weeks.
Well, and I think that we do have to kind of normalize like the intensity of what we're going through
Sure.
and understand that parenthood does this beautiful, I think it's beautiful, and I also think it's painful. It shines a light on everything. So for the first time, you and your partner are expected to do this thing together. But what ends up coming with you are your families of origin, your own personal values and ideas about this, and this incredible level of vulnerability. If there is an emotion that could be attached to parenthood, it would be vulnerability, because very rarely, and again, in 4 kids and 25 years in, very rarely have I ever felt like I've made an important parenting decision where I'm like slam dunk. That was 100% correct. And so most of us are feeling like, and the stakes feel very, very high. So I think the parts that I would encourage folks to know or to really understand about conflict, just in general, but it's very, very helpful after you've had kids in those early times. Whatever happens in the overnight hours, we're not going to try and get into it at that time. Everybody's patience is short. We're really tired. Like we're kind of going to put a little bit of a like grace period between the hours of like 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. Like those 12 hours, we're like, okay, both of us were crazy nighttime monsters. And we kind of like, okay. But then I think it really matters that we get very curious, each of us as an individual. When we're feeling triggered by our partner, we need to slow everything way down. So the first thing is to be like, ooh, I'm super pissed. Like, why am I so pissed? Mm-hmm. And to really try and get quiet about it. In the moment, you can have your feelings. I'm pissed. Okay. And do what you need to do in that moment to preserve the relationship, meaning if you start to feel like an F-bomb is coming out, or if you start to feel like, this is what happens when I get really angry, call for an adult timeout. Like, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go breathe for a little bit. I'm going to try and figure out what is happening for me, and I'm going to come back to you. And in the coming back, you're getting curious about yourself, because it's my firm belief that if your partner says that they love you, they are not ever purposely trying to hurt you. Now, it's completely different if they're a narcissistic jackhole, okay? Then we'll just say that that's a completely different situation. But if your partner says that they love you, then the assumption should be they did not know what it was that they did that hurt you. So you have to take some ownership and try and figure out, what is it about that exchange that really hurt me? I'm pissed, but really underneath, am I scared? Underneath, am I sad? Underneath, am I feeling disrespected? Underneath, does the tone of voice that my partner used when he was upset or she was upset last night remind me of my step parent and made me feel really scared and worried? There's a lot in there, and I know it sounds like a lot, but basically what I'm trying to say is get curious, slow down, try and figure out what that is. And just for sake of ease, you don't have to get to the exact memory or the origin. You can say, I think I heard some condescension in your voice. And condescension is a big trigger for me that has always like made me see red since I was like 8 years old. And if your partner can hear that, not in the moment, because they're going to be defending. So there has to be a time where you're like, we're not getting into it now. I'm going to get curious, and then I'm going to bring it to you almost like it's a gift. Hey, guess what? I just figured this out about myself. This is this new thing. And if your partner can receive it as the gift that it is, because it is. Like, I haven't shared this with anybody else, and I'm going to share it with you. This is my big trigger. Then your partner gets to decide, am I going to continue to poke that bear, or am I actually going to try and take this information in as new, like a new special piece about the person that I love, and I will try everything I can not to injure or re-traumatize this person because I love them.
I need to tell you guys about the Cerise Chill because it absolutely changed the way that I feel about pumping. First of all, it's so slick. It's basically a cooler that you pump into. It has all these different parts that fit together to form different cups, and then it all fits back together to keep your milk cold forever. I took 4 of these things with me across the country, and it kept my milk absolutely cold and actually started freezing it. So the Cerise Chill, I'm not even going to say more. You should just go check it out. There's a link in the show notes if you want to learn more.
Yeah.
But it has to be slow. In our culture, we want quick fixes and we want it to be right now.
Oh yeah,
And
I want
we
that.
want it to be surface level. You gotta slow down, and that's a big ask, I think.
It's huge. I feel like it's really true. I tend to, I'm not the most patient person, but I tend to, if anyone is unhappy with me, I want to fix it right away, immediately, yesterday.
Mhm.
And I understand that that's not always, effective, but I've learned a lot from slowing down. So that's a huge tool. I feel like that people can really take away. It's just getting curious about your own stuff, like not getting curious about your partner's stuff and being like, why are you acting that way? More like getting curious about why am I reacting this way?
I would tell you that the focus has to be entirely on you, not your partner. Your partner, I want you to be thinking like assuming they don't know what their part is in this. And I need to tell them how this hurts me. It's really about me, not you. That way the information can be received. And I also think it's really important to figure out 2 other things. Processing time, because I'm a quick processor. Let's go. You and I are the same. Like, let's talk about this. Let's get it out of the way. Let's
Ready
be
to
done with it.
process.
Yeah. And over the years, I have found that my partner is a much slower processor. So if we get into something that really needs to be worked out, sometimes I might need to write a letter and I'll give it to him on a Sunday. And I say to him, when you're ready to talk about this, let's go. And sometimes it'll be Thursday before he's able to say, can we sit down and talk about this? And in between Sunday and Thursday, I can't bug him. I'm not going to push him. I'm not going to pressure. He is literally figuring his stuff out. And then we can have a productive conversation about things. That's really, really hard. Last thing would be to figure out what your love language of apology is, which is the whole
my
thing.
Goodness. Okay, so we didn't even talk about love languages, but in general, there's 5 love languages.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to understand that maybe that framework is a little bit goofy, but is helpful to figure out like somebody actually, how do they receive and how do they experience feeling loved? And you actually don't have to go buy the book. You could actually sit down and be like, give me some examples of how you feel loved, and then get very specific. But once you have that, that can be really supportive. You want to try, if you can, to speak the other person's love language. If you both have the same, lucky you. But many of us don't. And so we oftentimes will speak our love language to the person, and it falls on deaf ears. It doesn't have the same level of impact. But the same can be true for an apology. My partner, if an apology to him means that you doing the action, the corrective action, and the apology that works for me is saying, I'm so sorry. So that's something, honestly, those 2 things, they don't hit. Sometimes he'll do all the things to repair, and I'm like, still haven't said the words, dude.
Yeah,
I need to hear the words. If you say, I'm sorry, we're done. And he's like, really? I'm like, say you're sorry. And he's like, I'm really sorry. And I'm like, I feel so much better. Thank you. Yeah, it's very interesting to figure.
Wow. That's really, really, I love applying that to apologies because also your love language might be something like not in those 5 categories.
Exactly.
But if you're thinking about your love language of apology, like what actually makes you feel like someone is genuinely apologizing.
Exactly.
So I love that. Okay. We're talking now about repair and apology. What does repair sometimes look like postpartum? What are some examples that you can think of that people have come to you with that are really good examples of a repair postpartum?
Again, I think some of it might be, which is a lot to ask, especially when you're in the first 12 weeks. What do I want to say about that, Emily? Because I don't want to put too much pressure on the person who's trying to physically recover, emotionally recover, learn how to feed their baby, all that kind of stuff, right? I think it might be important even before the baby shows up to have some conversations about what that's going to look like. I don't think I think figuring out between the two of you what repair actually does feel like is a really important piece before the baby shows up. But if we're stuck and that didn't happen. And now there's been a big bleh, finding time to be quiet with each other and to actually kind of do the work of connecting. And so what I mean by that is I always encourage folks to have at least weekly check-ins to start. So that baby is fresh. And on Sunday afternoons, when we know that they're going to be sleeping, we're going to grab something yummy to eat and something yummy to drink. And we're going to sit across or next to each other on the couch. And we're going to say, this past week, this is how you showed up for me. We always start with this is how you showed up for me. And this past week, this is where I really struggled. And I would have loved some support in these areas. And again, you can hear in my language that I'm not like you, because it's really hard to feel connected to anyone when you're feeling like you have to defend yourself or your actions or explain why something didn't go well. So this idea of really being transparent about what's working, what's not working, and then allowing for there to be change moving forward on both sides, right? Also, I would love to just do a shout out for sharing the caregiving of the relationship. I think it's wildly important that we really talk about that task being kind of shared equally. I think it is a cultural norm or idea that women are more empathetic and more, in touch with their feelings and blah, 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 whatever else you want to say about it. And that oftentimes means that they're the ones that are saying, hey, something's off between the two of us. We really should probably have a conversation. And I don't believe that that's true. I believe that male partners also have the full emotional well of things don't feel right, but they have not been socialized necessarily to be the one to say, what's going on between us? So having an open conversation or an opportunity for them to also be the caregivers of this relationship. So maybe you switch off weekly, who starts, who schedules it, what the food and drink look like. We get into a role of, and I always joke with my families, but I'm if it's been a really great week, the baby's napping, why don't you make out? Why don't you utilize the time you're hanging out with each other? I mean, that could be as much of a repair as anything else either as well, just being in physical proximity and connection with each other.
I love the idea of the non-birthing person being a caregiver of the relationship. I think that's really profound that I don't think most people would identify as being the caregiver of the relationship, but hearing that role, you're obviously I'm the one who's reading all the books and listening to the podcasts about how to have a better connection with my partner. And I think even just the choosing of the food and drink for the weekly meeting is huge because it means I'm the host tonight, Yeah.
I mean, and I think it's new and learned behavior. The part that I will tell you is that the families that I work with in particular, those partners want to be engaged dads. They want to be connected with their partners. They really want it to be different than how they actually saw it play out in their own families in a really significant way. And the culture, it's it pushes back against that narrative. And so it's kind of this piece where we have to be saying something different and then welcoming that person in to be not perfect at it as they try and actually kind of spread their wings and figure out how to do something different. I think a lot of people sometimes are like, oh, the poor man, and I get it. And I also really have to say, I think that there is room for us to actually really open our arms and our hearts to, this is something new for you. And I want this and you do too. So how do we make this happen together? Yeah.
And I think also it applies to any partner because as the partner, you already feel almost like second class because that baby soothes on the birthing person, no problem. And then you're like, well, I guess I don't really know how to do this as well as you do. And that's not really true, but that's what we're sort of socialized to come up with. I always use this with the families I work with. My partner would, I always would put the baby on the boob and feed the baby, and the baby is fine, soothed. But he had to come up with all kinds of crazy things to soothe our baby. And so one day I walked into the nursery and he has the baby like up against his face and he's going, I was like, what are you doing? And he's like,
yeah, get out of here. I'm doing the thing. This is my thing. Well, I mean, I joke about it, but my husband had 4 different daddy dances that he did with each of the kids. And each of them was different because each kid was like, I need something a little bit different. Put in a new move, Dad. But you're right. Like there are differences. And I think we need to acknowledge that and then honor them because all too often we become the person who's giving birth becomes the gatekeeper as well. And that really can set up a really negative dynamic on the other side.
Absolutely. So we kind of are getting into this idea of doing something different than the people before us did, especially generationally. The role of the partner was, a little bit more peripheral.
Yeah.
So I know that you're interested in talking about like being a cycle breaker. So what does that mean to you? Tell me a little bit about that.
I think it's really important to note and just to say out loud that many grandparents to be of the generation before oftentimes will kind of come into their new role almost like as a do-over. And I just want to say that because I think it can be really kind of a harsh reality for a lot of new parents where their father was gone on business trips or was never involved or not engaged or never changed a diaper and that kind of thing. And then they come in, they swoop in as the grandpa and they're like amazing, hands-on. And there's this weird sense of like, oh my gosh, that's so sweet. And also like, screw you. Like, why didn't you do that? Where were you when it was my turn? Likewise, grandmas to be have memories of what it was like when they were newly postpartum and their partners were not involved in the way that maybe their son-in-law wants to be now. And so having them come into that new parent dynamic can really screw things up because they edge out the partner without even intending to do so. So there's some weird stuff there. I also think it's really important that new parenting couples establish boundaries and really primatize their new family. So they make decisions kind of like, I don't want to say behind closed doors, but they make decisions together as a family unit. And then they actually share what those decisions are with their own families of origin. So there's never cross-pollination. Like you're never going to tell your mother-in-law on either side what the decision is. You tell your own mom or what have you. And then I think that there's another piece of there's a softening that can sometimes happen, not always. It depends on how you were parented. But there is this like ability to be compassionate around how you were parented when you're actually doing it yourself. And you're like, damn, this is really hard. And there's some sense of like, they probably were doing the very best that they could with the tools that were afforded to them at the time, with the knowledge that they had at the time. Like so much has shifted and changed over the years that parents today have even just access to tools and support and resources that no way the parents of the past did, right? So there's some weird pieces there. And then I think it's super important to understand that there are 2 times in your adult life that you can have earned secure attachment. And so I oftentimes will share this with expectant families because I think some of them are terrified that they're going to repeat the mistakes of their parents. Like they're terrified, like it was really bad. And I hear that. And I want to say to them, you deserved secure attachment and you might not have gotten it in your family of origin. When you find a partner that says, I want to be with you, and they are kind and respectful and it's a healthy relationship, that affords earned secure attachment. And then when you become a parent and you provide that for your child, that is the second time in your adult life that you are actually not just providing secure attachment for your child, you're actually getting it and giving it back to yourself. And there are ways in which that level of connection with your little one and the way that you're doing, like your child then will go on to actually parent from a secured attachment standpoint, and so on, and so on, and so on. So there are periods for sure when we can repeat the mistakes of our family, but we can also repair literally multi-generational years and lines of people that did not have secure attachment. It's very exciting to actually hear that, and I'm hopeful for people because sometimes that can be like, it's daunting.
Yeah.
My parents did a crappy job. What if I do a crappy job?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Yeah.
What would you say to people who like really want to have a secure attachment, but don't even know like what that means or looks like or feels like, or like, what is that? What is it?
So I think sometimes people get really worked up in wanting to do this thing perfectly. And actually, one of the things that came up in this conference was this idea of like the essentialism, like really trying to do this all perfectly. And whoa, not only is that not possible, but we got to like kind of like throw that out completely. You can be a good enough parent, and good enough parenting means that 30% of the time you are connected with your baby and whatever, or child, and whatever they are feeling, you're able to reflect back to them. So they're upset. You're also trying to calm them with a look of upset on your face. They're laughing and giggling. I'm laughing and giggling, right? We're having this like exchange between the two of us. That 30% will create secure attachment. Now, it doesn't mean that 70% of the time you ignore your child. It just means that it's okay if it's hit or miss the other 70% of the time. And that I think is really important for folks to hear when they're talking about trying to figure out their newborn. Sometimes you do everything, quote unquote, perfectly, like you've got it all down. And your baby's like, it's 7 p.m. and I'm going to let you show what my lungs can do. And you could try all the stuff and I encourage you to do it, but it doesn't matter. I'm just going to wail and I'm going to cry for the next 3 hours. And it's more important that you tag team with each other and keep it going and keep going back to your baby, even when you're like, we can't seem to soothe the baby.
I mean, we call that having spoons. If you have spoons in the drawer, you're good. You've got some patience. You've got some resilience. If you don't have any spoons left, you need to give the parenting to someone else.
Yes, exactly. And that piece of like understanding that, especially in the newborn period, there is this neuroplasticity that's happening for the parental brain as well as the baby's brain. And there's this exchange of warm and responsive interactions between the two, grows both of you, which is super cool.
It's so healing when you talk about like breaking the cycle of generations. It's so healing to even hear that you can promote a secure attachment in yourself by creating one with your own child. Like that's really, really powerful. How powerful is that? So how can people start to notice when those patterns are coming for them? Because it's not just the first 12 weeks, right? Like parenting is forever. And so it's, even if, everyone has spoons and everything is good and we're attaching securely and reflecting emotions back, there's going to be times when we don't have any spoons. There's going to be times when we are, sleep deprived and at our wit's end. And so how can we start to identify those little things that are coming back around?
There's a couple things that I would say. And the first is to identify your own triggers, to know like what's physically happening in your body when you start to actually kind of react as opposed to respond. And that might mean my belly starts to get really tight, or my shoulders come up to my ears, or I can feel the fact that an F-bomb is about to come flying out of my mouth. Like, what is your personal trigger that says I'm the last spoon has been taken out of my drawer, right? That can really slow things down a little bit. And then I think it's really important that we just give ourselves a ton of grace and that we forgive ourselves when we fly off, because it's going to happen sometimes. I think that one of the most important things that new parents can actually understand is that everything is in the repair. Everything. Like, you can blow up, you can really have a hard moment with a nonverbal toddler, okay? Like, you go off, you use an outdoor voice when you were hoping to be all gentle and calm. And after you get yourself settled, you can go and sit next to them while they're holding on to their little teddy bear and say, I'm really sorry that I used a big scary voice. Even if you're like, they're not going to say anything back to me. It doesn't matter. The repair is where it's at. They know that you've come back to a place of regulation and you are no longer in that heightened state. It's also really important that your kids witness repair between you and your partner. That they know, because they're going to catch it. They're going to see it when things are not in a state of constant bliss. And then when they can actually see, like, oh, but mom and dad, or mom and mom, or whatever, my parents are back into a place of stasis, that is secure for them. It calms them down. They then have this sense of like, home is a safe place. The world can be whatever it is, but home is a safe place. And that is truly the best gift that you can ever give to your kid. They look at the world from a completely different perspective when they feel like home is safe. And I guess I want folks to know some of the old patterns and stuff, they're going to come flying out of your mouth. Like you're going to say some of the stuff because it's a part of your family of origin story. Getting curious as to why that happened, and then taking ownership for it and repairing is kind of the way to do it. Lots and lots and lots of grace. This is really hard work.
If you are looking for a pacifier that will support your baby's oral motor development, the Mini is my favorite. So it's wide at the base and soft at the base, and it gets firm at the tip, just like a breast and a nipple and an areola. It's not as firm as a traditional pacifier, so it allows your baby to get used to getting organized around a softer surface. Use the code BeWellBaby for 10% off at checkout at minico.com. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, it's hard. And, people are like, oh, I don't want to be like my mom. I don't want to be like my dad, whatever it is. But you are going to sound like your parents because that's just in you. It's in you on a cellular level, and you can catch yourself and also forgive yourself.
Yeah. Yes.
We're all human.
Catch yourself and forgive yourself. And I think it's really important today too. I think this is a huge deal in terms of like the generational trauma and all this kind of good stuff. I would love for parents to know that this relationship between parent and child is a two-way street. And it's a two-way street from the moment they come into the world. Because if you actually kind of like persist in believing that you're the guide, you're the teacher, you're the one, it's like top down, I'm the font of all knowledge and I give this to you. Oh, I'll tell you, you're going to be in a world of hurt. Parenthood is going to be way harder than it has to be. If you can literally kind of settle into, we're in this relationship. This little person has come to me in order to show me, encourage me to be the best version of myself. So that means that they're a reflection of you. And that sometimes is painful because they will talk to you and stretch you and grow you and make you defend your values and beliefs. And they will, from very, very little age, right? They'll ask these innocent questions and you're like, damn, where'd that come from? Well, that came into the picture because this is a dyadic relationship and they're here to stretch you just as much as you're here to stretch them as well. If you can get into that place, there's a cultural trope out there that teenagers are horrible and it's hard and you're just going to have to suffer through it.
My 6-year-old talks about teenagers and she'll like roll her eyes at me and say, I'm just being a teenager.
I love the teenage years. I love it. They are emerging and they're becoming, and they are going to push literally every button that you have. It will be writ large at that point. Like, what do you believe in, Mom? Like, we're going to see if this is really true. And if you can soften into the fact that that's exactly what's supposed to happen. Oh, it's a beautiful time of like growth. While your kiddo is growing, then you're growing as this adult human being. It's like a whole nother opportunity to be the next iteration of you as the adult too. I love it. Yeah.
Well, that's great. It gives us all something to look forward to too. So, I mean, that feels like a really important way to be looking at healing generational trauma, that you don't have to have it all figured out because they're going to help you figure it out.
Exactly. Yes, It's true.
How do you feel like this healing that we're all trying to do, we're all just trying to do a little bit better than the generation before us. How do you feel like that healing can ripple both backwards and forwards in the family system, like with grandparents and everyone involved, aunts and uncles, and then down through the generation?
I mean, I think, honestly, there's something to be said from a neurobiological standpoint. I know it sounds kind of a little woo-woo and whatever, but as a mom, my child, we actually share about 84 million neurons. I don't know if you know this. This is
just only 84 million.
So basically, our children are imprinted with, all of their cells are imprinted with us on them. And so I really like to encourage folks to not think about trying to fix your kid or fix your parents behind you, but really the focus on trying to heal yourself. And it has ripple effects without us having to do anything. We don't have to try and change other people. When we actually really focus on how can I make myself healthier, like physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, like what are the things that I can focus on for myself? And then watch as the people around you shift and change. when you're in right relationship with them, their brains start to shift and change. We are meant to co-regulate with the people around us, and we will go through periods of dysregulation and co-regulation. And when we are dysregulated, our partners become dysregulated, our children. I mean, you know it. Like if you're sleepy and hungry and whatever else, the way that I say the words that I'm saying, the tone of voice that I have, it has an almost immediate impact and effect on the people around me. And when I'm feeling regulated, suddenly there's a lot of ease. I wonder why. Because like our bodies are actually speaking to each other in a very woo-woo space, but we're in that place of like relationship with each other. And we can't change anybody else. We literally can't. Like it can only be focused on ourselves. But when we do, everything else shifts and changes around us. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say that. Funny enough, I have never thought about it in the context of my own family, but when I'm teaching PT students how to massage each other, I teach them that we are all contagious. And when you walk into a room with a certain energy, people pick up on that. Everybody knows that.
Yep.
So like, why would that not be the same with my family who's actually like has 84 million neurons in common? Okay, Barb, I have a couple more questions.
Okay.
What do you wish that more new parents knew about the inner work of parenting?
That it's lifelong, that it is very intense in the newborn period, that it will then flare whenever it has to flare, that it really is lifelong. I think that's important, that as your children get older, the day-to-day demands will shift and change, and it might feel like you've got some more time and whatever else, not wiping butts, that kind of stuff. But, just even like 3 nights ago, I was getting ready to go to sleep, and my 19-year-old walked past, and I said, "How are you doing?" And she said, "Oh." I was like, "What's going on?" And that turned into 90 minutes of conversation. So that piece of like being available and willing to be an impact and be impacted by your children for your whole life long, I think is an important thing. And I also really, really want people to understand there is a kind of like a cultural thing of, you're going to become a parent. That's great. And I don't know that folks understand, like, what you are committing to literally is raising the next generation. And I say that so that people can both really wake up to what it is that they're doing, but also feel validated in how important this caregiving role is. Our culture does not at all honor the fact that pregnancy, birth, new parenthood, the sacrifice that's actually a part of that whole decision making, right? Because it doesn't come along with a paycheck. And I would like to say, no, if no one else has ever told you this, like what you're doing as a parent is the most important work you're ever going to do in your life. And it's most challenging. And sometimes it can be the most joyful. Sometimes it can also be the most fulfilling, right? It is a both and prospect. And I think it's okay to get honest and true and real about the work.
That's beautiful. It makes me feel good about this road trip that I'm on. That's really hard. If you could leave us with one invitation or reflection, what would that be?
Okay, I've got it. That's a big question. I would really love, in the era of parenting and parenthood in general and social media and the pressures of being able to Google anything, I would strongly encourage folks to actually tune out any and all quote unquote advice that is not something that you've asked for. So when unsolicited advice comes into your realm of awareness, please understand that oftentimes it's coming from a place of vulnerability. So the person is probably trying to shore up whatever feelings they have about you're making a different choice than they are. And there can be a real desire to make themselves feel better by telling you that what you're doing is wrong. When in fact, that's crap. What works for your family is what works for your family. And it shouldn't matter what your neighbors are doing or your sister or how you were raised. None of that matters. And if you come into a pain point where you're like, it's not working anymore, that's when you reach out to people that you trust, sources that you trust, not necessarily parenting expert, whatever. Go to the people that you're like, wow, they seem comfortable in their parenting choice on XYZ, like solid and comfortable in it. Ask them about that. Oftentimes the right sources will say things like, I mean, we tried this and it seemed to work. There should not be a lot of like, you should did. I think parenting and parenthood should be individual. And I think I would love for parents to be able to get to a place where they feel as confident as possible within the vulnerability of raising children, to feel like this feels right for us.
Yeah.
And then get ready to switch it up with each kid.
Right. Every single kid needs something different.
Totally.
It is so interesting. Every kid needs to be parented a little bit differently. And
Oh, yeah.
so they all have something to teach us about ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If you had to say the thing that you're most excited about working with people about right now, what is that most exciting thing?
I love talking to people about how their brain changes. And I love getting partners in the space to talk about it as well, because there's a real shift in terms of how they work together as a couple when they know what's going on for real. I love it. Yeah, I could talk about it forever.
And I can say from personal experience, I meet with Barb, with my partner, quarterly, because it's just really important to keep working on this stuff. And it has been so helpful for us and so valuable to, the health of our family. And I think specifically because of talking to Barb, my partner has really taken on a role of caretaking over the relationship.
Yeah, it's great. I love working with partners. I think that they are oftentimes overlooked. And so if anybody listening to this is like, I don't know if my partner would be into it, I usually the guys like me. I can hang with them. It's pretty good. They do.
I don't know. And it wasn't even me. It was Schaefer. I dragged him to the Couples Connection workshop and live. Mm-hmm. And after that, he was like, yeah, I would work with her. I like her.
That's good. That's good. I love it. Well, hugs to him.
Thank you. I will tell him. He will be so happy to hear from you.
Wow. Thank you so much for joining me for that conversation with Barb. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if anything spoke to you, if anything stood out, if anything changed your perspective, please let me know. I love hearing from you. And if you have a moment, leave us a review. It really helps the people that need it the most find these conversations. Next up, you'll get to hear my conversation with Laura Lucha. Wow. I cannot tell you how much I learned in that episode, and you will be witness to me having a realization that I will take with me into the rest of my life. Buckle up.